Like many aspects of photography, post-production is one of those things that always splits the crowd. I know some people who avoid it like the plague, going in search of perfect true-to-life shots straight out of the camera. But I also know others that take every advantage of it, switching skies, changing colours and completely manipulating photographs away from the original context of the photograph made by the camera. I like to think I sit somewhere in the middle. I like to use post-production to draw more of my intent out of photographs, to maybe darken areas, crop things and increase contrast and clarity to make things pop a little bit more. But I've been looking at my photographs recently and it's led me to ask the question, am I doing too much post-production? So I've come out to my happy place, the Yorkshire Dales and the area around Malham Tarn, to do a little personal experiment. I'm going to set my camera to record JPEGs and RAW files. I'm going to share with you a comparison of the JPEG straight out of camera and the RAW file, which I'll have done a bit of post-production on. It's going to be interesting to see which one I prefer and which one you prefer the most. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments section below. So let's go and explore this wonderful area and let's do this not so technical but very interesting experiment. I've started off by walking along this lovely boardwalk and there's these beautiful trees surrounding me that are covered in moss at the bottom of the trunk and then some really nice gnarly textures just above them, and this one here in particular has just drawn my eye just because we've got the split between the moss here and then the gnarly bark just above. So I think I'm going to give this one a go. I'm going to try and get it on a diagonal so that the tree trunk runs through the diagonal of the photograph, and put my aperture quite wide so the background falls out of focus. So we've got the lovely detail in focus in the foreground here, and then the grasses in the background and the moss all neatly out of focus and not drawing the eye too much. So I'm just going to have a look back at my shot, if I can get into it with my gloves on. And yeah, I can see that that's come out quite well. The focus is looking absolutely spot on, but I'm already thinking that there are some things that if I was going to do some post-production on this photograph, I would do, because the grass behind is looking a bit bright, so I'm tempted to just slightly darken that down a bit, just so it draws the eye more towards the detail on the texture of the trunk. But I suppose other than that, maybe boosting the contrast slightly and the clarity to emphasize that texture. There's not really much else I would do. I'll let you have a look at the comparison to see what you think, and I'll move on and see what else I can find. just reached this lovely little viewpoint over Malham Tarn, and I've been drawn in by the contrasting trees on the bank of the water and the way that the horizon line at the other end of the tarn curves round and draws your eye through the composition. It's the sort of shot that I would usually term black and white, so I've set my picture profile on my camera to record monochrome for the JPEG file. I'm going to be really interested to see how this comparison turns out, because I think monochrome settings on cameras are brilliant when you're looking through the viewfinder and you can actually see in black and white. But I often find, in the past anyway, that the photographs that I've made haven't come out quite as contrasty as I would like them to, even though you can play around with the individual contrast and sharpness settings within the camera, and also put colour filters on. It's something that I always like to play around with the colour sliders in post-production afterwards. So again, I'll let you have a look at the comparison and see which one you prefer. I'm going to carry on up the track and see what else I can find to photograph. Moved away from Malham Tarn now up onto the moors, coming in search of this lovely little abandoned farmstead hidden away in a copse of trees, which is currently sheltering me from the passing snow showers. There are a few things that are striking me at this location. First of all, it's the mood and drama of the place, which is intriguing me and making me pick up my camera to take photographs. I love all the warped lines that have decayed over time and are clad with this beautiful vibrant green moss. I'll be interested to see how that mood comes across in my JPEG files, because I'm already thinking about the post-production that I would do to these photographs in terms of maybe dodging and burning a bit of light and shade to really boost the contrast and emphasize that mood that I'm feeling and the mood that I want to get across to you, the viewer of my photographs. The other thing that's striking me is the way that I usually crop my photographs. It's making me think about how I formulate my frame. Usually I would crop into certain compositions to make things a little bit tighter at the edges and to make the composition fall into place a little bit better, even if that's not a standard aspect ratio. But if I'm not doing any post-production at all, then I'm having to stick to that 3:2 perspective, and that, I must admit, is a little bit tricky. So, I'm back home and I've just finished editing my RAW files and had a comparison with the JPEG files straight out of camera. So I suppose it's at this point where I should draw some kind of conclusion from, as I said, this not so technical experiment. Now, I suppose I should go back to that question that I asked right at the very beginning of this video. Am I doing too much post-production? And my honest answer, after looking back through the photographs that I've made, is potentially yes. I feel that I often use post-production as a bit of a safety net, thinking, oh, I don't have to get absolutely everything right in camera because I'll be able to fix it afterwards. And on top of that, I also feel like I don't know my camera as well as I could do. I feel like I may have got a bit lazy over the years. I found whilst I was out and about in the Malham area, I was changing little settings that I wouldn't usually change to try and get things absolutely spot on to the camera's meter, such as changing the exposure compensation in relation to my aperture, shutter speed and ISO settings. And also setting those picture profiles as well. Usually I'd just leave it on standard or flat and shoot away on that, knowing that when I get the photographs home and editing them on the computer, then I'll be able to bring a bit more punch and life back into them. One of the things that has struck me looking back at the comparison of these photographs is how much darker my edits look compared to the original JPEG file. And I think that comes from my intent in my photography. I like quite moody, brooding photographs, especially when I'm out in a landscape setting like I was at Malham Tarn. I just think that extra bit of mood and darkness brings a bit more atmosphere into my photographs. Having said that, looking back at some of the JPEG files, I think, well, blimey, that's quite a bit lighter, and maybe I could put a bit more light into my photographs just to cheer them up a little bit. But maybe that comes down to personal preference at the end of the day, what we like looking at, and ultimately what we want our viewers to get out of our photographs when they look at them. And I must admit, as I was walking round and there was some snow showers passing through and the weather was very changeable, I wasn't thinking, oh, I want lots of bright, pretty photographs here. I wanted to get across some of that atmosphere and, as I say, mood into the photographs that I was making. I think what we've got to remember as well is the fact that post-production has always been a part of photography. Even from the early days when photographers would dodge and burn in the darkroom, change the dilution of chemicals to change the contrast of the photographs, and in colour photography change the colour filters on the enlarger to change the hue and colour saturation of their photographs. These days, of course, we have software to do that, and I think it gets to a point where the software can be so easy to use, or maybe on the flip side of that, quite technical to use. And if you don't know how to use it properly and efficiently, then it can be easy to push things too far. And then, of course, we have our own individual perspectives on how too far is. And this all goes into that sort of spiral of people saying, well, you're doing too much on your photographs, you're not doing enough. And it just becomes a minefield, basically. So I suppose the conclusion that I'm going to take out of this experiment is that I am going to pay more attention to my camera and its settings whilst I'm out in the field. I'm also going to pay more attention about how I'm framing shots up to try and get the framing absolutely spot on, rather than having to straighten horizon lines or maybe straighten buildings up. But I'm also going to continue doing post-production on my photographs because, as I've said, it helps me to get my intent across using the mood and atmosphere of the shot. I also think it helps us to straighten odd lines if needs be. I don't have a tilt-shift lens, so like the shot that you saw earlier on of the barn or the old farmhouse, which was slightly leaning over to the left in the JPEG shot, I'd straightened it up afterwards and also turned it black and white. And I think some of those little afterthoughts are worth thinking about as well. When I took that photograph, I thought, oh, it looks great in colour, so I'll leave it at that. But then when I looked at it on the screen that was larger afterwards, I thought, actually, that might look quite good in monochrome. So I decided to switch it afterwards rather than whilst I was out in the field. After doing this experiment, I have to admit that I admire people that don't do any post-production on their photographs, because it shows that they've got to know their cameras really well and that they can produce really top quality pictures coming out of them. However, I would say that post-production will always be a part of my workflow. When I take photographs using the raw files, I know that I'm getting all the data out of the camera and not compressing them into a JPEG file and losing a lot of the detail that the camera can produce. But also getting that intent across and just having it as a backup, just in case there is a wonky line somewhere that I want to straighten out, or there's a colour that I want to just pick out and saturate a little bit more. It just gives us more versatility. I know that people say that they want to get a true-to-life photograph by just getting it out of the camera, but although our cameras are so technical, for me, I don't think I do get a true-to-life photograph out of it. I feel like the photographs that I produce need a bit of post-production to make it true to life to my eye. Like everything in photography, it ultimately comes down to our personal preferences. If you want to change skies, manipulate your photographs and create digital artwork, which is completely different to the original photograph that you took, then that's absolutely fine. If you don't want to do any post-production whatsoever, then that's also fine. It's these decisions that we make that mould us into the individual photographers that we are, and don't let anybody tell you you're doing anything wrong if you're going from one extreme or the other. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then please give it a thumbs up. It helps me to disseminate the channel with other people like you to help them to learn about the ins and outs of photography. If you'd like to join me on a photo walk through an inspirational and unique location, just like the one I was walking through around Malham Tarn, then check out YorkshirePhotoWalks.com for our latest schedule. You can also follow Yorkshire Photo Walks on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, that's @PhotoWalksYorks. And as I said at the beginning, I'd love to hear your comments about how you treat post-production in your photography. I'd love to hear them, so please share them in that section below. And if you haven't done so already, then please subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I look forward to seeing you in another video very soon. See you soon.